When other kids were playing outside, you were keeping an eye on your younger sibling, or you were just being really, really quiet because the adults were stressed and you didn't want to add to it. Nobody sat you down and assigned you these jobs. You just figured out that if you didn't do them, they wouldn't get done. You probably don't remember the exact day you stopped being a kid. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like slowly realizing that while everyone else was still playing games at recess, you were already thinking about what needed to happen when you got home. By the time you were old enough to notice you'd been different, you'd already been different for years. People probably told you that you were so mature or an old soul, and they said it like it was a good thing, like you'd won some kind of award. But nobody mentioned that growing up early costs you something, and that bill doesn't come due until you're an adult, wondering why you can't relax even when everything's fine. Here's the thing. There's a difference between growing up naturally and being forced to grow up. When you grow up naturally, you learn responsibility bit by bit, with adults there to catch you when you mess up. When you're forced to grow up, you learn responsibility because nobody's catching anyone, and if you don't figure it out, things fall apart. The first one builds confidence, the second builds anxiety that looks like confidence. Studies on kids who took on adult jobs too early, things like watching siblings, managing household tasks, or keeping parents emotionally stable, show that these kids become really capable really fast. They're organized, responsible, good in a crisis. But what the studies also show is that these same people struggle with anxiety, have a hard time saying no, and can't stop taking care of everyone even when it's wearing them out. For most kids who grew up too fast, it happened because the adults around them needed more than they could give. Maybe your parent was sick, dealing with addiction, going through a brutal divorce, or just completely overwhelmed by life. Maybe money was tight and everyone had to pitch in. Maybe there just weren't enough adults to go around. It wasn't that they didn't love you, it's that they didn't have what you needed, so you learned to not need it. And that's the part that changes everything. Your brain figured out early that your feelings, your tiredness, your fears, those were optional. But everyone else's problems, those were urgent. So you stopped asking for things. You stopped expecting someone to comfort you when you were scared. You learned to handle your own emotions because nobody had the space to help you with them. You became the kid who didn't need much attention, the adults could count on when everything else was chaos. But the truth is, you needed attention. You needed someone to notice when you were scared or overwhelmed or just tired of being the grown-up. You didn't get that, so you became the person who gave it to everyone else instead. This shows up now in ways that might seem unrelated. You probably don't know how to relax. And I don't mean you're busy. I mean when there's actually nothing urgent to do, you feel anxious instead of relieved. Your body doesn't recognize peace as safe. You find things to worry about, problems to fix, because having nothing wrong feels more dangerous than being stressed. You're probably also amazing in a crisis. When everyone else is panicking, you get calm and competent. You've been handling emergencies since you were 8 years old, so chaos doesn't throw you off, it actually focuses you. You know exactly what to do when things go wrong. But when life is stable and calm, you don't know what to do with yourself. You keep waiting for something bad to happen because in your experience, good never lasts. There's also this thing where you can't ask for help. Not because you're stubborn, it's deeper than that. Asking for help feels wrong, like you're breaking a rule you don't remember learning. You're supposed to be the one helping people, not the one who needs help. So even when you're drowning, you say you're fine, and people believe you because you've always been fine. They don't know that you never actually were fine. You were just good at functioning anyway. And here's what might hurt to hear. You're probably really good at taking care of people. You notice when someone's having a hard time before they say anything. You know what people need almost before they do. You're the friend everyone calls when things go wrong, the coworker who keeps the whole team running, the partner who manages everything at home. But when someone tries to take care of you, you feel uncomfortable, guilty, like you're asking for too much just by accepting what they're offering. Some people who grew up this way end up building really solid lives from it.
They're the responsible ones, the organizers, the people who get things done. Their early crash course in adulting made them genuinely capable, and they know how to use those skills well. They're not bitter about it. They made something good out of something hard. But others are tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. They're exhausted from always being the one everyone leans on, tired of managing other people's feelings while nobody asks about theirs, tired of being capable when they really want is for someone else to handle things so they can finally stop. And here's what makes the difference. Did you learn that being responsible is something you choose when you're ready, or did you learn that being responsible is what you have to be for people to want you around? Because here's what happens when you learn the second one. You start believing that if you stop being useful, people will stop caring, that your worth is tied to what you do for others, not who you are, that love comes with conditions, and the main condition is that you hold it together so everyone else doesn't have to. Research shows that adults who had to grow up too fast struggle with something specific. They can't stop taking care of people even when it's draining them. They say yes when they mean no. They take on more than they can handle because turning someone down feels like failing a test. But what the research doesn't talk about is the quiet fear underneath all of it, that if you stop being the reliable one, you stop being worth keeping. Here's the thing most people don't realize. You're not still doing this because you're naturally helpful or because you like taking care of people. You're doing this because some part of you, probably a very young part, still believes that being needed is the only way to make sure people stay. So here's the question. When you say yes to something you don't want to do, is it because you genuinely want to help or because saying no feels like risking the relationship? When you take care of someone, is it because it brings you joy or because you don't know how to feel valuable any other way? And here's the harder one. If you stopped being the person everyone relies on, who would you be? Because somewhere under all that responsibility and competence, there's still that kid who never got to figure out who they were when nobody needed anything from them. The people in your life right now aren't asking you to carry everything. You're not 8 years old anymore, responsible for keeping the household running. You're not the only thing standing between chaos and stability. But part of you still feels like you are. And until you see that this feeling is left over from a time when it might have been true, but isn't anymore, you'll keep running like the world will collapse if you stop. And that's not something to be proud of. It's something to grieve. If this sounds familiar, I'd love to hear your story. What's one thing you were responsible for as a kid that you're still carrying now? Can you remember when you first realized you were different from other kids your own age? Let me know in the comments. If this connected with you, leave a like so it can find other people who grew up too fast. And if you want more content about how childhood shapes who we become, subscribe. You can also share this with someone who might finally understand why you can't stop taking care of everyone.